Chosen one, welcome, radiant ones. You didn't land here by accident. You were summoned by frequency. The room you're in right now isn't just a space. It's a convergence point for the spiritually encoded, the divinely activated, the ones who carry fire they didn't ask for but refused to waste. Let's get one thing straight from the jump. You are not regular. You never were. That pull people feel when you walk in, that shift in the air when your name gets mentioned, that's not ego, that's energy. And it's time you stop downplaying it. This is your reminder. You are carrying something people can't define, so they try to contain it. They get curious, they get competitive, they get confused, and all you did was be. You've spent your whole life wondering why rooms feel weird after you speak, why people stare like they're trying to read your spirit, or why love never feels simple. It's because you're not built for ordinary. You're built to disrupt, to awaken, to mirror truth. Today, we're not dimming the light. We're not apologizing for being too much. We're turning the volume all the way up on who you are and what you carry. Because this energy, this presence, this divine heat pulsing through your bones, it's not a problem. It's a weapon. And in this space, we honor that. So buckle up, powerhouses. You're not just about to hear a message. You're about to remember who you are. Let's go. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. There's an intensity that enters long before the body does, like an unseen tide pulling at the edges of awareness. Not everyone recognizes what it is, but they feel it. Sudden shifts in their tone, uneasy laughter, puzzled glances, all arise not from confusion, but from contact with something they can't quite name. It isn't charm. It isn't intent. It's presence in its rawest form, and it hums like static in the air before a signal breaks through. Long before the mouth moves, something else makes itself known. This presence isn't a lure or a baited hook. It's an ancient pulse wrapped in modern skin, electric and uncontainable. When it brushes against dullness, it ignites sparks, not from provocation, but from resonance. It isn't about motion, sound, or appearance. It's what surges from the unseen core, vibrating on a level that bypasses logic entirely. Beings feel it, not just people, but every living thing that's tuned into instinct more than intellect. The stillness before words, the ripple before a wave, that's where it speaks. There's no performance to it, no manipulation. It's simply energy, yet not simple at all, not crafted, but coded with intent. It awakens recognition in those who've never learned the language of energy, but know they've heard it before. Some feel threatened. Others are drawn like moths with no idea why their wings burn. They reach out, not because they understand, but because they hope contact will decode what they've long forgotten. But this isn't something to decode. It's something to respect. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. It doesn't chase attention. It rearranges the atmosphere. Like a sudden change in weather that shifts the whole horizon, it arrives without warning and cannot be ignored. Those built on illusion, those surviving in disconnection, find themselves unraveling. They might label it as seduction, mistake it for mischief, or try to possess it outright. But this isn't a commodity. It isn't something one can touch and keep. It's wild and sentient, not taught, but carried. Long before anyone notices the footsteps, the signal has already passed through. It doesn't knock. It doesn't whisper. It alters the rhythm of the space. And by the time words are spoken, the message has already landed. There's an imprint carried within that hums with a generative pulse, one that stirs the dormant in others without a single move or word. It's not merely presence. It's an internal ecosystem that breeds possibility. When others cross paths with it, their reactions are rarely casual. Some lean in without understanding why. Others falter, not from fear, but from sensing that they're standing before a spark capable of rewriting something inside them. What draws them isn't surface-level attraction. It's the chance to become something they've forgotten they could be. This essence isn't bound to appearances or expressions of strength. It's catalytic, alive with the potential to initiate internal shifts. Not just a flicker of hope, but the ignition of an entirely new route, an unseen compass pointing toward something they didn't know they were missing. That's why people unravel in this field. It's not admiration, it's seeking. A silent plea to feel again, think differently, evolve beyond the ordinary. Often, broken or directionless individuals gather near, not for comfort, but for the unspoken push toward movement, they sense might exist here. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. What surrounds this presence is not a halo or mystique. It's a pressure, the kind that causes change. Like the weight of an idea waiting to be born. Those who linger too long, without understanding it, often confuse their urgency. They grasp at closeness not out of love, but out of craving rebirth. Their intentions get tangled. The connection they long for isn't romantic, it's revival. They think intimacy will give them access to that fire, but what they seek can't be captured through contact, only mirrored through internal alignment. After being in its orbit, people shift. Some rise, some collapse, but none remain untouched. Because this frequency doesn't offer comfort, it offers truth, a reflection of where they are and where they could be. That's why envy and obsession often trail behind. Not because something was done, but because something was felt. This energy doesn't invite control. It demands reverence. It's not a mood or aesthetic. It's fertile ground for change, rooted in something ancestral, timeless, untamed. It doesn't perform. It doesn't beg for attention. It becomes the moment. And those who encounter it don't chase love, they chase resurrection. Because for a fleeting second, in that presence, they remember what it feels like to be fully alive. There's a reason certain connections never felt clean. They weren't about affection. They were about acquisition. Often cloaked in compliments or closeness, the truth beneath was colder. The aim wasn't to bond, but to siphon. People weren't showing up to meet you. They were showing up to extract something they didn't know how to cultivate themselves. Their fascination wasn't about depth or alignment, but about gaining access to what you carry effortlessly. It goes beyond charm or attraction. There's a pulse in your presence that alters dynamics, a current others don't understand but instinctively chase. It isn't always malicious. Many don't even realize they're doing it. But somewhere deep in their unconscious, they feel that standing next to you might reroute their misfortune, amplify their voice, or clear their fog. So they mimic love, echo your words, promise protection. But it's all scaffolding to mask the real pursuit. The hope that your inner reservoir might overflow into theirs. Some of them never truly saw you. They only saw the glow. They memorized your rhythms, mapped your vulnerabilities, and inserted themselves in moments when you most needed relief. Their timing wasn't coincidence. It was tactic. And where there should have been partnership, there was quiet exploitation. What looked like affection was strategy. Getting close enough to drink from your well without refilling it. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. That's why so many exchanges left you hollow. You weren't being met, you were being consumed. Your clarity was borrowed, your vision replicated, your grounding leaned on. And when they walked away brighter, you remained dimmed, because you were offering and they were absorbing. And though it wasn't always visible, the imbalance was felt. You knew it. Your gut said it before your mind could catch up. That ache, that unease, that unspoken depletion, it wasn't confusion. It was wisdom trying to speak through the noise. Every time your body tensed without reason, every time your spirit pulled back mid-conversation, you were reading the truth. You've never been meant to be someone's quick fix, emotional charger, or secret ingredient. You hold something rare, not meant to be taken, but respected. And that kind of access isn't given through manipulation. It's earned through alignment. There's a current flowing through that doesn't simply leave an impression. It shifts foundations. Not everyone has the capacity to stand in it. This isn't a presence that offers convenience or calm for the sake of it. It brings recognition. It stirs things. It calls things forward. And for those out of sync with themselves, that kind of clarity feels violent. The reaction isn't always conscious, but it's visceral. Their system detects something it can't filter or ignore, and suddenly they're unsettled. Not because of harm, but because of revelation. This intensity doesn't come from effort or pretense. It rises naturally, like a signal breaking through static. When the vessel is clear, emotionally stable, energetically tuned, the result is not gentle. It's transformational. To the ones who are ready, It feels like returning to something they forgot they needed. Their minds rest. Their breathing deepens. Their defenses lower, not out of surrender, but because they feel recognized without having to perform. They may not have the words for it, but they say things like, "I feel lighter around you." That's not coincidence. That's transmission. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of a sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. But for others, it becomes confrontation. Not from action, but from presence alone. The inner noise they've been drowning out grows louder in proximity to such alignment. Their avoidance cracks. Their stories become fragile. Illusions don't hold in that kind of truth. So rather than meeting what's being surfaced, they recoil. They mask it as anger, discomfort, or blame. But underneath it, there's fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of being changed. There are those who descended into chaos after encountering this field. Not because harm was done, but because a dormant truth within them was forced to rise, and they weren't prepared. Their undoing wasn't created, it was revealed. And it shook the parts they spent years trying to silence. That's why boundaries must be sacred. That's why access must be earned, not casually offered. This isn't the kind of frequency one stumbles into unguarded. It isn't a mood or vibe, it's refined voltage. And those who make contact without internal readiness will either recalibrate or collapse. What's being carried here isn't soft or simple. It's catalytic. And anyone who touches it must be ready to meet what it wakes. There's a difference between being wanted and being sought after as a means to an end, and too often, the line gets blurred. Many who gravitate toward this presence are not guided by affection, but by calculation. They're not reaching for connection, they're reaching for elevation, thinking access alone can unlock what they've long been missing. It's not admiration for the person, but hunger for the force they sense beneath the surface. This pull isn't about romance. It's about proximity to something they believe might shift their own path. There's a pressure that builds in their chest the closer they get, and suddenly their intentions twist. They confuse influence with intimacy. They mislabel spiritual opportunity as emotional chemistry. But their motivations, while dressed in kindness, often reveal themselves in small fractures. Competition hidden beneath praise. Possession disguised as protection. The behavior flip is rarely random. One moment it feels genuine, the next it feels transactional. What changed wasn't the energy being given, it was the realization of what that energy might provide. Without understanding why, they become restless, strategic, entitled. They may smile, but in their mind, they're measuring, trying to figure out how to anchor themselves beside something they haven't earned, hoping proximity will substitute for alignment. It's why some connections feel more like negotiations than relationships. Suddenly, time must be justified. Space must be defended. Attention becomes a resource others scramble for. Not because of affection, but because they believe being near might tilt the odds in their favor. And beneath the surface of it all is attention. People trying to bypass the internal work by latching onto someone who's done it. These are not romantic pursuits. These are subtle maneuvers for access. It's why even friendships start feeling political. Why admiration becomes rivalry. Why some speak of loyalty but operate like strategists. They think standing close is enough to inherit what was built through fire. But it doesn't work like that. Influence doesn't transfer through contact. Grace doesn't respond to manipulation. Doors don't open for those who mimic alignment. They open for those who embody it. And no matter how carefully someone tries to blend in, the energy knows who's ready and who's just reaching. There's a reason stillness has become a form of precision. Choosing silence, restraint, and intentional distance isn't a withdrawal. It's the sharpening of force. This isn't about denying connection. It's about refining where your essence flows. When alignment deepens, certain choices become sacred acts of preservation. That withholding isn't rooted in fear. It's rooted in clarity. There's no need to scatter fire where it won't be held with reverence. What appears from the outside as absence is actually consolidation. The more your essence remains within, the more it crystallizes. Energy, when uninterrupted, doesn't fade, it amplifies. It builds strength, acuity, heat. Words gain texture. Presence becomes directive. Instinct no longer wavers. And while others think nothing is happening, you're becoming a force they can no longer bypass. That's why disconnection causes disturbance in those who once had access. They don't long for your company. They miss the lift they got from your current. They confuse longing with loss of leverage. The hunger they feel isn't for closeness. It's for the field they can't enter anymore. And when your access narrows, their tactics surface, not out of affection, but out of desperation. Withholding isn't about resistance. It's about anchoring. When energy isn't drained through casual permission, it settles. It strengthens. It redefines your boundaries. And anything rooted in spiritual integrity becomes untouchable by those who only know how to take. To them, your silence feels like mystery. Your refusal becomes magnetism. But it was never a game. It was a choice to become indivisible. Not everyone understands what it means to safeguard energy. They assume distance is about ego or rejection. But the truth is, your restraint is a form of preparation. You don't just protect yourself. You protect what flows through you. To withhold is to wield. It's not about inactivity. It's about becoming a contained storm. One that strikes only when called by something true. Reactions weren't shaped by what was said or done. They were shaped by what was felt. Many didn't disappear because something went wrong. They disappeared because their illusions cracked open too soon. Getting close triggered a response they weren't prepared to process. The mirror showed up before they were ready to look. That intensity wasn't aggression. It was honesty. Presence, when aligned, is a catalyst. It doesn't need to perform. It doesn't push. It simply stands. And in standing, it invites revelation. Not everyone wants to see themselves in that light. It's easier to vanish than to admit what's been hidden. Not everyone who leaves does so in anger. Some flee clarity. Some can't sit still in spaces that reflect their own distortion. This wasn't rejection, it was reaction. When a field carries truth, it resonates in every direction. Some find peace in it. Others tremble. It's not about pressure or judgment, it's about resonance. When energy is pure, it amplifies contrast. What isn't aligned starts to shake. What isn't authentic begins to fracture. And those fractures become too loud to ignore. That's why engagement often faded before it deepened. It wasn't about pace or connection. It was about readiness. The reflection became too sharp. The internal noise became too loud. It wasn't seduction that made them uneasy. It was confrontation. Because what they feared wasn't rejection from you. It was recognition of themselves. The fire you carry doesn't call people to escape. It calls them to evolve. But not everyone accepts that invitation. So they walk, not because of something you did, but because their shadow stirred. And when truth knocks too hard, some people choose silence over transformation. There's a distinct discomfort that settles in the room when certain people meet what they've spent years avoiding, and often, that moment happens in your presence. You don't lure. You don't provoke. You reflect. And that reflection becomes unbearable for anyone built on imitation. It isn't that you exposed them intentionally. You simply existed without compromise, and that clarity made their illusion tremble. People don't react because they were seduced. They react because they were revealed. They weren't drawn to you to experience love. They were trying to hide their lack beneath your light. But that light didn't disguise them. It stripped them. All the carefully managed masks started cracking under the pressure of your authenticity. What they called temptation was just recognition of everything they still hadn't reconciled within themselves. You didn't manipulate. You didn't pull strings. The unraveling was their own doing, sparked by contact with something real. That's why flattery quickly turned into accusations, praise into projection. They couldn't admit their internal chaos had been quietly challenged. So they called you the cause of the storm they already carried. You didn't create the mirror. You just stood in it. The strength you carry doesn't chase, it stands. And in doing so, it reveals. That revelation becomes unbearable for those who don't yet know how to meet their own reflection with grace. They run, not from you, but from what they see through you. You weren't too much. You were too honest. You weren't their downfall. You were the moment the facade stopped working. So when people disappear, lash out, or twist the narrative, It's not because you failed them. It's because they weren't prepared to meet themselves in your frequency. Not everyone is ready to be mirrored without distortion, and some will try to break the glass before they ever face their own image. Nothing sacred comes without demand. Encounters that seem harmless on the surface often carry deep resonance when the soul is involved. What some approach casually ends up leaving them unraveled, not because they were deceived, but because they engaged without understanding what they touched. To cross thresholds without readiness always comes with cost. There's an architecture within you that's not visible, but deeply protected. What you carry is layered with ancestral weight and spiritual intelligence. It's not just flesh, it's code. And to engage that without reverence is to enter terrain where accountability is immediate. The effects aren't punishment. They're echoes of imbalance being brought into view. Patterns don't lie. After crossing into your space, many find themselves suddenly lost. Not because you drained them, but because they awakened something they couldn't interpret. Systems they depended on stop working. Paths they thought were theirs begin collapsing. What they mistook for a moment of pleasure was actually a key turning in a lock they weren't meant to open without intention. You don't need to explain this. Some things are not meant to be verbalized. Those who move through your world unaware will feel it in their bones soon enough. This isn't arrogance, it's awareness. Your presence isn't an invitation. It's an agreement. And the moment someone treats it as disposable, they find themselves confronting what happens when sacred ground is mistaken for common soil. This isn't about being picky. It's about discernment. The access you carry alters people. It peels back layers they've hidden even from themselves. If they're not prepared to meet what's exposed, it will dismantle them. So the barrier you hold isn't rejection, it's protection. For them, and for you. Some interactions are not random. They are pivotal markers along a soul's trajectory. And certain connections are not just emotional or physical, but energetic thresholds. Coming into contact with that kind of current shifts more than mood. It redirects futures. There are individuals who unlock something far greater than attention. They activate alignment or collapse it. Whether someone is aware or not, entering that field is never without consequence. These aren't mere connections. They are turning points disguised as moments. One approach rooted in integrity and clarity, and life begins to accelerate. Synchronicities unfold, clarity sharpens, and unseen doors begin to swing open. But those arriving with manipulation or shallow intent find something else entirely. Patterns unravel, illusions shatter, and truth arrives with force. It's not punishment, it's equilibrium. The interaction itself is a measure, not a gift freely handed to just anyone. Being entangled with someone whose core radiates that kind of encoded energy means stepping into an unseen architecture. Some walk away blessed without even realizing why. Others disintegrate slowly, blaming chance, unaware that they crossed a threshold without readiness. This kind of presence doesn't reward performance. It mirrors authenticity and demands alignment. Everything unspoken becomes visible. Every hidden motive is stirred to the surface. When someone stumbles into such a current casually, treating it like a detour instead of a sacred crossing, they meet the weight of their own disharmony. Things start falling apart in places they never expected. Relationships shift. Opportunities dissolve. Inner storms begin. Not because of the person, but because the energy won't host what's false. The field rejects what's misaligned, and only those in resonance will rise from it whole. These interactions are blueprints in motion, invisible structures shaping what follows. It's never just connection. It's a soul checkpoint. And those unprepared to meet their own timeline shift often walk away confused by the chaos they unknowingly triggered. There are moments when energy causes movement before a word is even spoken. Certain individuals don't chase the spotlight. They carry something far more disruptive, a presence that acts like a tuning fork. Step into their space, and frequencies adjust. Not by force, but by resonance. That silent effect ripples farther than most understand. Rooms start rearranging the moment they enter, not through effort, but by default. The people around them sense something that cannot be verbalized. Suddenly, the confident feel uncertain, the content feel restless, the hidden feel exposed. It isn't personal, it's energetic, and the presence that causes it often has no idea it's happening, because they're simply moving in alignment, not attempting to impact anything. But the impact is real. Dynamics shift. Friendships begin to sour. Partners become defensive. Power structures subtly tremble, all without provocation. The truth is, certain energies are disruptive by nature, not chaotic, but revealing. And anything built on insecurity begins to buckle in that presence.